Acting as barriers that players must face before progressing through the story of any game, bosses essentially act as skill checks to help gauge whether you've prepared enough for battle and are ready for what's to come next. And with us having gone through around 37 boss battles, we've shown that we're more than prepared for what's to come our way. However, there are some bosses, like the ones we'll be exploring here, that exist not only to test our resolve, but also to reward our time and understanding of Kingdom Hearts' mechanics. Of course, these super bosses won't make our lives easy, and will do everything in their power to put us in our place and on the back foot, forcing us to weave between attacks before we're even able to land a few hits. Thankfully, among these super bosses in Kingdom Hearts, each stands out as an incredible piece of world building that this game is so known for, serving as some of the greatest fights throughout the series, with one in particular leading to one of the single greatest showdowns in gaming history. Of course, these bosses aren't the only defining elements here that make this journey as incredible as it has been, as the history and mythology of each within their respective worlds helps us understand and relish the incredible lengths that Kingdom Hearts has gone through to tell its amazing story. With nearly every world's keyhole fully sealed and our path to the final world open for us to venture through, we're told that a new tournament is available for us to jump into, regardless of what Chip and Dale tell us to do, as well as the end calling to us. I'd actually recommend jumping back into Hollow Bastion for the time being and landing in the library, as we'll find that the Final Fantasy crew has made the library their new base of operations. And if we speak to Aerith at least 3 times, we'll be rewarded with not only the even-numbered Ansem reports, but Curaga as well, granting us the final and extremely necessary healing spell for the coming fights. And with Curaga acquired, the game and each of the worlds are essentially open for us to glide, swim, and jump through to unlock every chest that we may have missed, gather any materials we might want for synthesis, or even erase any Trinity marks that we couldn't previously erase. And though not entirely necessary, completing these tasks will make our lives just a little bit easier for what's to come next. For if we head to Neverland, you may just notice that one of our save points, the clock tower specifically, is no longer available to us. Thankfully though, it should be easy enough to just reclaim, as Tink here can lead us right back to it as long as we have Peter Pan in our party. Phantom. Probably the most ingenious fight mechanically of the entire series, as it requires us to not only weave between his attacks, but forces us to match our attacks with the color surrounding their heart, with yellow for thunder, blue for blizzard, and so on and so forth. On top of this macabre dance high in the sky, Phantom will continually cast doom on individual party members that connect them to the clock tower itself, requiring us to keep an eye on the clock tower's hands and cast stop on the clock itself to guarantee every member's survival throughout the fight, including our own. Unsurprisingly, this phantasm of a super boss, while mechanically brilliant, is matched by the mythology and even the history surrounding this boss and its arena. Design-wise, Phantom appears ghostly or otherworldly, with no face, no feet, or really any other feature aside from its relatively human shape, appearing more like a ghost of Christmas yet to come than anything else, which is more than likely the exact idea that the designers were going for when designing this super boss, as spirits, or rather ghosts, phantoms, and the like, all share one thing in common: their incorporeal essence of what was once a human life, a former existence that once had such a strong will, or such a strong heart in this case, that this heartless became the Phantom of the Clock Tower. So, something I find fascinating about this phantom amid the clock tower is its connection to the balance between life and death, and to the many ancient beliefs surrounding ghosts and spirits that haunt the corporeal world. In ancient Egypt, beliefs about the dead and their spirits was typically viewed as a permanent paradise, with the duat and the field of reeds acting as that person's home until the end of time, with even the pharaohs arriving there to continue their rule into the next life. A view that was especially prominent during Egypt's Middle Kingdom, as life and death were seen as an internal balancing act, viewing that the corporeal self was to remain on the earth under Ra's watchful eye, while the Ka, or the essence of what a person really was to remain in the afterlife. Or if a person's spirit were to remain in the corporeal world and return to the physical body or het, then this action would hinder the balance of existence, disturbing Mayat and the balance that she strived so hard to maintain, and potentially condemning or even upending the afterlife and sowing chaos on a cosmic scale. On the other side of the world, the Japanese, especially during the Heian period, believed in otherworldly spirits known as Yurei, where the spirit or reikon of a person who had died by violent means would become angered or vengeful, and thus preventing their spirit from joining their ancestors and helping or guiding their family for generations. Instead, the Yureis are forced to seek out the person or people who condemned them to their early demise. For those who lived to see these tormented spirits and tell the tales, the Yurei are often described as appearing humanoid, without feet, floating through the air wearing only a pale white kimono or silk cloths to represent their funeral attire that they were so wrongfully taken away from, with some even being said to be accompanied by a pair of hitodamas, or soul orbs, that appeared as small flames. Details that directly connect these supernatural figures to the Phantom itself, as their attacks and the remaining time on the clock look like balls of fire, with their design, especially in the final mix version, being updated to a white and black cloak, reflecting the notion of this heartless meeting an unsavory and potentially violent end. With that said, when talking about ghosts, spirits, or phantoms, it's important to note that the soul of a person is a deeply religious aspect that not only creates these apparitions, but also connects them to the balance between life and death. As nearly every culture, both ancient and modern, view the concept of a soul as the true self, with those innocuous traits and tendencies being the voices of that soul. So again, with the Egyptians, the soul of a person, or the Ba and Ka, were seen as two parts of a soul's essence that made up the person's personality and individuality, being seen as a bird that would fly throughout the afterlife, fulfilling the memories of a person before reuniting with the Ka, with both aspects requiring proper funerary rites in the living world to allow the person to be transported to the afterlife and received by Osiris, the god of the dead. The same can even be said about the Yurei, as we explained earlier, as many people who followed traditional Shinto beliefs needed proper funerary rites to join their ancestors and be at peace with their past and present lives. Now, what's interesting about this, however, in relation to their view on the soul, was that they, much like the Egyptians, viewed the spirit of a person as being comprised of 4 distinct souls, that being the Era Mitama, Nigi Mitama, Saki Mitama, and the Kushi Mitama. 4 aspects of a person's spirit that fittingly connects to the 4 elements of the phantom's heart: physical, thunder, fire, and blizzard. That said, from observing just these 2 perspectives concerning spirits and the soul, you can probably see just how complex these concepts can be when comparing various cultures and beliefs around the world. So then, why? Why would this phantom haunt Big Ben? Well, this comes twofold. The first being that as time is such a prevalent theme throughout Neverland's story, as well as in its source, the phantom is more or less representative of the end that awaits each and every person, which conveniently leads into our second, being that of the Grim Reaper, a figure and personification of death that has become synonymous with the end of times for everyone, be it calm or violent. Thankfully, these 2 aspects, time and the Grim Reaper, are not only mythologically connected, but historically as well. For starters, time was believed to be conducted by 2 separate yet equal deities among ancient Greece's history, that being the Titan of the harvest, Cronus, and the personification of time itself, Chronos. Though separate in our current understanding of their cult of worship, many during antiquity saw these 2 as one god, who presided over the ebb and flow of time for all things, with each being rightfully depicted wielding the scythe or sickle, with texts like that of Hesiod's Theogony providing evidence for this, where Cronus acquires the tool to remove the family jewels from his father. As such, it is with the sickle and later the scythe that many have used to represent the motion of the harvest, as this was the primary tool for cutting wheat, barley, and other grasses during the fall and coming winter season. This representation would as well conceptualize the death of something or someone as time ended for all creatures, and the harvest could be just as deadly as well as it being a time of celebration. That said, as time progressed into the late Middle Ages, especially during the mid-14th century, the association of the end of life with the sickle or scythe would become widespread with the emergence of the Black Death, a tragedy that led to millions dying over the course of nearly a decade across Europe. In this horrific time, people from all walks of life succumbed to the plague, which in turn led to many using art and traditional beliefs to help not only understand this tragedy, but also provide some relief from it as well. Thus, the Grim Reaper was born, with Jean Fuchs' 1460 painting of a skeletal figure wielding the scythe, an art piece that would lead to others like this fresco at the Church of St. Mary in Croatia in 1474, and Michael Vogemuth's 1493 The Dance of Death. Pieces that would personify the act of death and our natural transition to the afterlife, alongside the skeletal remains of what was once human. And surprisingly, it wouldn't be until the Victorian era that the Grim Reaper would begin to be depicted with a black hood and a black cloak, presumably because funerary attire had at that time transitioned from white to black in color, all of which would eventually lead to this superboss, the Phantom of the Clock Tower, to appear here in Neverland, as this is, as I had stated during our time in Neverland, legitimately England at or just after the Victorian era. As such, the cloaked figure of death would have been nearly identical to this depiction. Of course, if we're skilled enough and have used our time wisely, we won't have to worry about death taking us or any of our party members, as defeating this grim phantom will reward us with the Stopka spell, which, if we've already done the Hades Cup by this point, should actually be our very last spell upgrade, making us the Master of Magic. From here, we can now reclaim that lost save point and leave this world for good. Now, really quickly, before we continue, I'd just like to mention that these videos take an incredible amount of time and effort to research, write, and produce. I've got a lot of great projects in the works that I'm really excited to get out to you as quickly as I can, but I can only do that with your help. So if you'd like to speed up that process or just show that you enjoy these deep dives, consider subscribing to the channel or joining our Patreon. Whichever you choose, your support honestly means more than you know. But enough about that, let's get back to the video. With Phantom taken care of, let's next go after our easiest fight of the bunch, as you'll be amazed with what you can do against this super boss. And it also does have some great mythology behind it, just saying. But making our way to Agrabah and landing in Aladdin's home, you'll notice that Carpet is either dancing or doing everything it can to get our attention. You may have seen him before if you were here previously collecting materials and unlocking chests, but this time if we do talk to him and go for a ride, we'll encounter something most would never expect to find in the scorching sands. Zisa, probably the weirdest Heartless we've ever faced up to this point, simply for the fact that he is a completely mechanical Heartless, having 6 arms, a snake's head, and a body like a carapace of a beetle. Zisa seems almost out of place here in the desert and in Kingdom Hearts as a whole, as up till now, the closest Heartless resembling this boss would be the guard and opposite armor. Those were never truly mechanical like what we see here. Aside from this unique appearance, Zisa is a mechanically dense fight, even more so than our fight against Phantom, as his attacks are long-reaching. He casts silence on the party, applies barrier to himself, and can turn himself into a whirling dervish near the middle of the fight. It's honestly a fight that will definitely take some getting used to, and may even require some trial and error. That said, Zisa has a major weakness that we can easily exploit, especially if you're playing on Proud Mode. Firstly, equip anything that can increase our MP and our summon gauge. Second, we'll need to go into our abilities and turn on EXP 0. Then finally, during the fight, after we've destroyed one of his silence orbs while he's stunned, complete a combo on him, and then summon Mushu. And as Miss Game Champ says, just sit back and sip a latte. And even if you're not playing on Proud Mode, using Mushu will still wreak havoc against Zisa's health bars. Now, of course, you could do this fight the traditional way, which even in my playthrough only took about 3 to 4 minutes. But why not become the super boss ourselves? But as I had stated earlier, Zisa's design is an oddity among the Heartless, as we've never really seen a fully mechanized Heartless like this before. However, given their location, it's actually quite fitting for this super boss to be found here in the desert, which is aided by its design taking elements from various cultures, like that of the Egyptians, the Near East, and even that of India. Starting with its beetle-like appearance and eruption from beneath the sands, this actually aligns with the ancient Egyptian belief of the sacred scarab, a beetle that was revered for its representation of rebirth and the rising sun throughout Egypt's ancient history, representing not only the rebirth of pharaohs with their departure from the mortal plane and into their afterlife, but as well with the god Khepri, who himself represented the rising sun of the new day, as he was viewed as the incarnation of the sun god Ra, a connection that can be furthered through Zisa's weapons, 2 sickle swords that are incredibly deadly and bear a striking resemblance to the Khopesh of ancient Egypt. Though I should mention that they may also take some inspiration from the Shotel of Ethiopia or the Samshir of Persia, as each are traditional curved blades of warfare. As for Zisa's more mechanical appearance, this is probably the coolest aspect of this Heartless Superboss because, I mean, come on, we're fighting a giant mech! That's so f***ing cool! But what I didn't realize until looking into this further is that this mech harkens back to the very first Superboss ever to appear in RPGs. More specifically, the War Mech of Final Fantasy I, which appeared by random chance during the final dungeon of the game, and most notably, Omega of Final Fantasy V, who sat within the interdimensional rift near the end of the game. Two mechanical superbosses that appeared out of place given their locations in the games, but provided players with a challenging fight and meant that we needed to be on our toes no matter what, much in the same way that Zisa is here in Agrabah, as someone could easily jump into this fight without any prior knowledge of it and be pulverized by him. That said, as an automaton like the War Mech and Omega, Zisa's depiction as such is actually seen in various forms throughout the eastern portion of the Mediterranean and the Arabian Peninsula. One example of this, an especially famous one at that, is seen within Greek mythology, that being Talos, the living statue, powered by the ethereal Ichor, whom is forged by the smith god Hephaestus and tasked with protecting the island of Crete, where he travels about the island thrice per day and kills any who dare attempt to make land on it. However, as an automaton, Talos is driven solely by his duty, and is in a way akin to Zisa, as both are heartless in a sense, and through the use of magic are subsequently defeated, with the witch Medea, who had joined Jason and the Argonauts, being the one to cast incantations on Talos and draining his Ichor away. It aligns with Sora using Mushu to destroy this mechanized Heartless as well. Another example can be found in Hebrew mysticism with the Golem, who was viewed as an automaton as well as a protector of not only the rabbi who created them, but also the community that the rabbi was part of. The Talmud states that one of the very first golems to ever exist was, in fact, Adam, the first man, formed and brought to life through an alchemical process, permeating the clay and stone with the magic of their language, while imbuing God's name and light into that being. And though not a machine like Talos or Zisa, the Golem itself adheres to the themes of free will and creation, much like automatons, as the Golem was formed as a symbol for the Jewish community and the agency that they desired from their constant oppression that they faced for multiple millennia. And much like how the Golem can become a danger through their literal understanding of their creator's words, we can find that Zisa here has become enough of a danger to the world of Agrabah to be put down for good. Of course, this Heartless might just relate to the origins of our modern understanding of robotics and engineering, which stems from this apparent Arabian region we find this superboss in. Though many revel in the engineering boom of the Italian Renaissance, thanks in part to Leonardo da Vinci, it's actually been found that many of his inspirations came from his study of mathematics, engineering, and anatomy that originated in the Arab world, with one polymath like himself, Ismail Al-Jazari, being said to have inspired da Vinci in creating many of his own devices. Recognized as the father of modern robotics and engineering, Al-Jazari in the 13th century had been credited with creations such as the hydraulic pump, the candle and water clock, as well as the music box, just to name a few. Moreover, Al-Jazari's notes even account for the creation of an automaton servant for the Ottoman Empire. Furthermore, the region for which Al-Jazari called home, Upper Mesopotamia, once sat along the northern portion of the Arabian Peninsula and encompassed what is now Iraq, Iran, and Israel, with Iraq connecting especially so, as the city of Baghdad was the primary inspiration for the city of Agrabah, connecting this genius of the medieval Arab world and his homeland to the creation and placement of this heartless automaton. Lastly, let's talk about the elephant in the room, Zisa's 6 arms, as these are probably what many players, myself included, noticed first when facing off against this incredible superboss. Now, if you've played games like Skyward Sword, Azura's Wrath, or even Final Fantasy IV, you've no doubt seen bosses and characters with multiple arms, with each of these figures, along with Zisa, sharing a common connection with the Asuras of both Buddhist and Vedic beliefs. According to the Vedas of India, the Asuras were described as an incredibly powerful race of supernatural beings who were in constant conflict with the Devas, such as Vishnu, Shiva, and Brahma. Interestingly, as each of these gods were multifaceted, they were often depicted with multiple arms or even multiple heads in some cases to represent the power that they had over different provinces of life and the universe. With Vishnu, for example, having one arm used for war, another to show the purity of existence, and another to potentially represent the thinking mind. In comparison, the Buddhist Asura, being similar in nearly every way to their Vedic Asura counterparts, were seen as demigods of rehabilitation, being believed to have gone to war with the Devas and lost due to their drunkenness, and subsequently committing themselves to sobriety to regain their godhood, representing that even among the mightiest of the cosmos, rehabilitation was still possible. What's more is that these beings, the Asuras, would over time be brought to Japan during either the 5th or 6th century CE as Buddhists moved further east from India and China. And though many Buddhists and their faith were generally accepted within the empire of the time, the mixing of Shinto belief and Buddhism meant that some, like the Asuras, would be seen as aggressors against traditional Shinto beliefs, transforming the rehabilitating Asuras of traditional Buddhist belief into the Ashura, demons who were bent on destruction and violence against any that they called their enemy. With that said, a truly fascinating note I'd like to add with this is that the term Asura is similarly seen among the Indo-Iranian languages, with the word Ahura, with the term Ahura dating back to pre-Zoroastrianism, where Ahuras were seen and regularly represented as the divine good of the world, with the term even being co-opted in Zoroastrianism's golden age in ancient Iran with the primary deity Ahura Mazda, a connection that is now believed by many scholars such as Asko Parpola, professor of Indology at Helsinki, to have helped shape the titling of the Aesir in Norse belief. A fact that is, as crazy as it sounds, furthered with the ability that we gain by defeating Zisa, Zentzuken, a signature move for the summon Odin throughout the Final Fantasy series, and a summon who directly takes their name from the primary deity of Norse belief and the leader of the Aesir gods. But now, with Zisa officially defeated, and Agrabah freed from the incredibly deadly Heartless, it's time that we left this world and finally made our way to Olympus Coliseum to face off against the superboss I'm sure you've all been waiting to see. However, before we can face off against him, we do need to take on and beat each wave of the Hades Cup so the 2 final cups can become available to us. And before you say anything, yes, the Ice Titan of the gold match is considered to be a superboss in Kingdom Hearts. However, we've already discussed them along with the Rock Titan during our first visit to Olympus Coliseum. So if you'd like to learn more about them and their connection to the elements, I'd highly recommend checking out that portion after this. Clarification aside, let's now step into the Platinum match and see what divine hell awaits us on the other side. The one-wing angel himself, Sephiroth, a superboss that when first encountered here so many years ago had me both excited and awestruck by his sheer difficulty. I'd typically provide some advice on what to do, but all I can say here is, good luck. This fight, this singular fight, is what separates the casuals from the hardcore gamers, because no matter how leveled you are, how many boosts you use, Sephiroth will always be the true final boss of Kingdom Hearts, and exists as a superboss in the truest form, humbling you into either submission or outright determination. He's fast, he hits hard, and he can take everything away from you in an instant. Now, if you somehow haven't played Final Fantasy VII or seen anything of it, Sephiroth here originates from the same game as our edgelord Cloud, and much like how he antagonizes Cloud here after our first victory, Sephiroth plays that same role in his home game. But I'm getting ahead of myself here because, oh boy, do we have a lot to cover with Sephiroth, as his incredible design work and theming here in Kingdom Hearts is enough to make any essayist quiver. Let's start off by discussing Sephiroth's name, as his name is directly inspired by the Sefirot of Jewish mysticism, which stands as the 10 emanations of the Kabbalah, with followers of this school of thought understanding that these 10 exist as the paths to interpret Yahweh's will. In these, the channels of the Sefirot act as a sort of tree of life that begins at the most comprehensible roots, where the bottom 7 serve as conduits for understanding the more emotive and physical landscape that humans bear witness to each and every day, while the top 3, not including Keter, sit as the intellectually unknowable emanations of Yahweh's will at the highest point of the canopy where the unknowable sits. However, it should be noted that these 3 give rise to the other 7, creating a cycle of creation, life, and rebirth. A cycle that Sephiroth wanted to start back in Final Fantasy VII with summoning Meteor to rewrite the world of Gaia, and a cycle which is reflected through the summoning circle as well that carries him into the arena, as its many circles potentially reference the attributes of the Sefirot. What's more is that this summoning circle is nearly identical to the one used to summon Bahamut in Final Fantasy X, which stands as another game in the series that discusses the themes of the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. And speaking of themes, undoubtedly one of the most recognizable themes in all of gaming, One-Winged Angel has garnered a reputation for being both exciting and terrifying for players, with its almost celebratory fanfare and haunting choir, with its opening lyrics stating, Estuans internius ira vehementii, sors immanis et inanis, which roughly translates to burning inside with violent anger, fate monstrous and empty. In this, the lyrics convey a foreboding sense of how angry someone can get when seemingly wronged by fate. And given Sephiroth's unsettling upbringing during Final Fantasy VII's story, He is potentially speaking or thinking these words throughout the final fight, as he himself might believe that he was wronged by fate and now acts out violently against it. Speculations aside, the entirety of this piece, though composed brilliantly, isn't actually an original made just for Sephiroth, as its many lines are actually an amalgam of lyrics from the late great Carl Orff's Carmina, Burana, which itself is an amalgam of the collection of medieval poems and songs of the same name from the 11th to the 13th centuries. What's more is that the theming of each of these pieces, the original collection and the subsequent pieces, convey similar yet different messages throughout. With Sephiroth's One-Winged Angel, the theme plays off of his anger and his desire to become immortal, while Orff's describes fate and how it affects a person's life. Then, finally, the original collection of the same name uses satire to mock life, love, and fate during that time. To be honest, it's incredible that such satire was later made into such serious and monumental pieces of music. But as each theme describes, fate has other plans. Now, we've discussed fate all the way back during our time in Destiny Islands and at various points throughout our journey, but something I've neglected to discuss until now is how fate affected ordinary people. More specifically, how fate and its representative goddess, Fortuna, were seen by the people of Rome and her surrounding territories. To start, Fortuna, or as the Greeks referred to her, Tyche, was a daughter of Jupiter, who represented the fated prosperity of people's everyday lives. As such, many of her statues and paintings depicted her with a horn of plenty to show the fortune that she could bring to those who worshipped her. Of course, this wasn't the only aspect of her power, as she was also capable of steering the fate of every person, all while allowing chance to favor some while others suffered. All of which would be represented by Fortuna wielding a ship's rudder as well as a wheel of fortune. As for Fortuna's presence among the people, she was unsurprisingly a really important figure throughout Rome's territories and long history. Dating back to the 6th century BCE, she was primarily venerated for her connection to the harvest, with many praying to her for bountiful crops, which led to her being associated then with the Horn of Plenty. Moreover, many who traveled throughout the country were said to have prayed to Fortuna for safe passage on their fated journey. Understanding that, though the spinning of the wheel was out of their control, many could still attempt to help the dial land on a more fortunate outcome. That said, Fortuna's power over fate was not to the extent of the Morai, as they primarily determined the destiny of a person, from their birth to their death. Instead, Fortuna's control over fate was centered around a person's everyday life, as she was more capricious with her favors of fate. So, as I had stated earlier, each version of Carmina Burana describes some notion of fate, and as such, One-Winged Angel, especially in Final Fantasy VII, helps convey the cruel fate that Sephiroth uncovers about himself and the cruel nature of his superiors in Shinra. As for its inclusion here in Kingdom Hearts, while yes, it is more than likely meant to just be his battle music, as you can't have a Sephiroth fight without it, I find that its connection to fate here is actually an appropriate one. For though we are destined to travel through each of the worlds, sealing each of the keyholes, and thwarting the darkness at every turn, when facing off against this superboss, we can only pray for good fortune, or cry out, "Oh Fortuna!" as we try again and again to win against Sephiroth. With that said, we've got to talk about Sephiroth's design here, as this is the coolest and honestly edgiest he's ever looked in his many appearances thus far, with his black cloak now sporting bat-like wings on his wrists, red lining throughout and most importantly, a singular black wing. A notable change from his original FF7 design, but with that singular wing, it's a feature that has since become integral to his design in every appearance he's made. And though Kingdom Hearts is the official place where Sephiroth would appear with this iconic black angelic wing, this edition isn't exactly a feature that came exclusively from Kingdom Hearts, as this wing was meant as an homage to Safer Sephiroth at the end of Final Fantasy VII, where Sephiroth appears akin to the angels of Abrahamic mythology, though sporting a singular corrupted wing in its stead. And though Sephiroth here in Kingdom Hearts doesn't appear to have multiple wings as with his original Safer Sephiroth form, this design still draws inspiration from the Seraphim in the three Abrahamic faiths in three distinct ways, with the first being the Seraphim themselves, the second with the fallen angel motif, and lastly with a specific fallen angel being described as having a singular wing. With the Seraphim, these angels have been depicted in various ways, from zoomorphic forms, as seen through the supporters of the throne of God within Islam, to human heads supported by multiple wings shown through medieval Christian paintings of the 14th century. However, though different in appearance they may be among the Abrahamic faiths, Seraphim are almost always considered to be among the highest angels comparatively, most notably exemplified in Hebrew and Aramaic mythology as humans with 6 wings that were said to cover their feet and eyes, leaving their mouths and arms open, portraying their ability to speak the word of God and give their blessings through their hands. Nevertheless, this angelic appearance among the three faiths isn't the only one, as scholars now suggest that the flying or winged serpent of Egypt, understood to be the goddess Wadjet, was the original depiction of the Hebrew seraphim, as the term seraph or seraph in Hebrew means burning or burning one, with that burning believed to be derived from the venom that cobras produced. Furthermore, seraphim are referenced in the books of Isaiah, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, where they are contextually associated with serpents, such as the Egyptian Uraeus, denoting the divinity of the person. This is why the seraphim, as being the highest under God, is an influence for Sephiroth's overall design and stature, as his appearance is corrupted divinity, with his words even hanging in the air to burn or taint our own faith, being a snake in both his own game and here as well, to poison or flare our senses. In this, Sephiroth's corruption is not just reflected in his motif as a seraph or seraphim of Abrahamic belief, but as well through his fall from grace as a fallen angel, where these celestial beings, who were once arbiters of God's words and graces, fell by either fighting against or denying their heavenly creator. Though not mentioned outright in any biblical text, they are alluded to as the sons of God, found in the Book of Genesis, and further expanded upon within the Book of Enoch, where these sons, as angels, descended upon the earth to copulate with the daughters of man, resulting in the Nephilim being born from them and these angels being barred from re-entry into heaven. So not physically falling from the heavens in this case, but falling from their divinity to indulge in mortal desires. Aside from these, one angel, known as the Morning Star, fell all the same, but has subsequently altered our own understanding of not only fallen angels, but heaven as a whole. According to Christian belief, Lucifer, otherwise known as the Morning Star, was seen as one of the highest angels among heaven's court, being thought to either be a cherub or a seraph, where he would sing the praises of God for all angels and men to hear and cherish. However, due to his growing pride in thinking that he was more powerful than his creator, Lucifer was said to have rebelled against God and lost, and thus would be cast out from heaven and thrown into hell. This fall from grace, surprisingly enough, is seen in Ovid's Metamorphoses, where he is mentioned multiple times, not as an angel, but as the personification of the actual morning star. Understood at that time to be the planet Venus, which is understandably confusing, as Venus was the Roman goddess of beauty and love, but this actually only furthers the idea that Lucifer, being the morning star, was the most beauteous among the heavens, and to watch its fall or dimming as the dawn came would sadden those who observed the night sky. Of course, this falling or dimming from grace is undoubtedly one of the most famous stories in our understanding of fallen angels and of Lucifer himself, thanks to stories like that of Paradise Lost, where author John Milton describes Lucifer's inner turmoil and transformation from angel to demon, where he illustrates Lucifer's descent as hideous and wrought with flames, burning as brightly as his prideful passion had during his war, and a burning that is seen in the eyes of this fallen angel through Alexandre Cabanel's 1847 stunning painting, The Fallen Angel, where he shows Lucifer and his turbulent emotions in exquisite detail. In this painting, and even in Cabanel's prior attempt, we see the one wing of Sephiroth begin to take shape. In both iterations of the fallen angel, one of Lucifer's wings, which sits on the same side as Sephiroth's, is shown to still retain its feathered and heavenly appearance. But as we progress further down the wing, we can see it becoming blackened or burnt. The same can even be said for Cabanel's original fallen angel painting, where the wing is instead tarnished and becomes more bat or reptilian looking as we go down further, showing Lucifer's demonic nature unfurling from within and progressively corrupting him. And it's in this that we find our third and final piece in understanding Sephiroth's one wing. Found within the pseudo-diagraphical work, the Testament of Solomon, the text notes King Solomon of that time communicating with certain demons to learn their stories and understand the systems that each had dominion over. Among the angels who had joined Lucifer in his rebellion against God, the demon Abezithibu had lost one of their wings during the prolonged struggle in heaven, and as such was cast down into the depths of the Red Sea. Additionally, it's later learned through Solomon's discussion with that demon that he was the one who, during the time of the Hebrews' exodus from Egypt, had been the one to harden the Pharaoh's heart, claiming himself to be the true adversary to Moses and his teachings. Moreover, Abizthabu was as well said to be in charge of Tartarus, and was to be the one to prescribe the many heinous punishments for damned souls. Now, I should note that although King Solomon is a historical figure across the Abrahamic faiths, the Testament of Solomon, which describes his demons, including Abezthabu, is in reality non-canonical, meaning that this is more so a piece to bridge the gap in many people's understandings of certain stories and themes, especially on the inner workings of fallen angels and the like. Of course, that isn't to say that it doesn't draw on the ideology of that time from the mythology surrounding demons and fallen angels, as the understanding of Abezthabu as the punisher of those in Tartarus provides a fascinating connection to Sephiroth here, as we face off against this one-winged angel in the underworld's equivalent of Olympus Colosseum, where he can easily and happily punish us for any and all mistakes we make during the fight. That said, when observing the mythology of angels, both heavenly and accursed, it's clear to see that wings, whether as a single pair or in multiples, are meant to represent the completeness and divinity of these supernatural beings. In seeing Sephiroth with a singular wing, or any angel for that matter, it denotes a sense of them being incomplete or potentially corrupted. This is why we see Cloud with a singular wing, which sits opposite to Sephiroth's, as these two are meant to be incomplete and have, in their own way, fallen from their divinity, and in their fight become complete. Having said that, I actually feel it's pretty appropriate to take this moment to note that Riku, like Sephiroth, is depicted with a single wing in both the original and final mix cover art, with the original cover art depicting him with a demonic wing thanks to his sword, Soul Eater, while the final mix box art depicts Riku with an angelic wing made of stone, showing how Riku is thematically incomplete while having both light and darkness within him, with each wing sitting on opposite sides, expressing that though Riku falls to the tantalizing power of the darkness, he is still able to recover and reclaim his light, though unfortunately at the cost of that darkness weighing down his ability to step fully into the light. Finally, I'd like to briefly touch on Sephiroth's most iconic element in his design, and one that makes fans both ogle and bemoan at the mere sight of it, that being Sephiroth's sword, the Masamune, a recurring weapon in nearly every Final Fantasy game, both before and after Sephiroth's arrival, and even outside of it, where the sword is oftentimes seen as one of, if not the most powerful sword that a wielder can use in a fight. Believed to be in reality an odachi rather than a common katana, the Masamune is named after the swordsmith Goro Nyodo Masamune of the Kamakura period, who is thought to have been the greatest swordsmith ever to live, as his reputation and craft were so well perfected that some of his pieces actually remain even today, where they are widely believed to still hold their sharpness after so many centuries, and a belief that may just stem from one legend of Masamune being challenged by his esteemed student, Muramasa. In the tale, Muramasa, who had grown from a humble student into a prominent swordsmith himself, had grown prideful, believing himself to have surpassed his former master's teachings. As such, Muramasa challenged his aged master to a contest of their finest blades, to see whose was sharpest. With each taking their sword, they stuck them into the nearby river to see what would be cut and what would remain. With Muramasa's sword, anything and everything its edge came into contact with was cut into two. The water, the leaves, the fish, even the rocks that tumbled into it were cut in two. However, with Masamune's blade, as it sat calmly in the river, only the leaves that crossed the blade were cut, with the water flowing right around it, the fish unharmed by the sharp blade. With this, Muramasa laughed at his former master, believing that his blade was in fact superior, and proceeded to mock the master as well. However, a monk who had watched the whole thing approached the two and proclaimed that Masamune's sword was the superior blade, as his did not cut indiscriminately, stating that Muramasa's blade was in fact a bloodthirsty one, and one that would easily cut down any opponent just as well as a helpless butterfly. From this tale alone, we can see the prowess that the Masamune has and why it's become such an iconic blade throughout the Final Fantasy series and even outside of it. But given this story, you'd expect Sephiroth to happily wield Muramasa's blade, or as an antagonist in every game he's featured in, including his time here in Kingdom Hearts, you can see him strike with absolute power and ferocity. However, I firmly believe that this is actually a play to his ability as a swordsman and his wanting to have only the best in everything that he can acquire, showing that by wielding the Masamune, the most powerful of blades, he is the best swordsman there is, all of which justifiably establishes Sephiroth among the divine pantheon of superbosses across all JRPGs. Moreover, when we do finally defeat Sephiroth, we're given the most incredible and cathartic cutscene in the entire game that I just can't help but show again. And now, with Olympus Coliseum completely finished, we're left with just one final superboss, and one that I'll happily dub our 13th struggle. Surprisingly, before we're even able to face off against this superboss, we actually need to make our way to the final world, land, and then fly back to Hollow Bastion, where we'll land in the chapel. Once there, we'll find that a new dark corridor has opened up that appears to be similar to the one Maleficent used after our initial fight against her. Interestingly enough, if we speak to each of the princesses before stepping inside to find whatever lurks beyond that corridor, we learn that the force on the other side is wholly different from the darkness that we've faced thus far, and is apparently much stronger than anything we have faced as well.
Who are you?
I am Sam?
What's that supposed to mean?
Unknown, and I'm gonna sound like a broken record here, but this is the coolest and edgiest secret slash super boss among the other super bosses in the entire series, as their pirouettes and domination over the arena space not only tests how strong we've become, but also tests our patience as well. However, if left unchecked, Unknown can easily destroy any amount of health that we have, as his attacks are flashy and extremely quick. Plus, their use of literal lightsabers and Sith lightning is incredibly badass. His words, "Allow me to test your strength," hangs in the air with so much gravitas that it's enough to make your controller feel heavy. It's a fight so intense that this just might put the final battle to shame comparatively. Ultimately, This is a battle of attrition, where you'll undoubtedly be slamming your head into that barrier of his over and over again until it eventually breaks. Thankfully, you can actually make this fight a little bit more predictable if you decide to summon Genie or Simba, where you can then make use of Gravaga to stun Unknown just long enough to get a 1-2, 1-2-3 combo off before he recovers. Then just rinse and repeat the cycle. That said, this method isn't foolproof, as he can still force himself out of the cycle, so please do be wary. But as Sora, Donald, and Goofy show this boss their collective strength in their attempt to defeat him, let's talk about the history and mythology that may have inspired this incredible boss. So, much like our first time here in the highest room in the tallest tower, fulfilling our role in saving the damsel in distress, Unknown's purpose here similarly fills out a fiendish role among our knight's tale. Seeing as this figure wears a black cloak with no discernible markings, and as the princesses had told us prior to entering, is not of the darkness like previous enemies in Heartless, Unknown's being here may just be inspired by or potentially alludes to him being the Black Knight of Arthurian legend. A recurring figure among the Vulgate and post-Vulgate cycles, where in each story, the Black Knight is suitably adorned in pitch black armor from head to toe, and bears no heraldry of their own. Believed to have first been titled the Black Knight in the 13th century French poem La Vengeance Rachedelle. I butchered that completely, so please forgive me. The story describes the Noir Chevalier to be the perceived murderer of King Arthur's knights and his foster brother Kay, though through his battle and defeat against Gawain of the Round Table, it's learned that the Black Knight sought only to test Gawain's true power, much like Unknown, and would later serve alongside Gawain in search of the story's real villain. In another story from the 15th century, the tale of Sir Gareth, contained within the French prose La Morte de Arthur, it shares that Gareth, then known as Beaumains, encounters the Black Knight in his quest. So named Sir Picard, the Black Knight here is once again depicted as one of the fiercest warriors of the land, though he is otherwise slain by Gareth when he is caught off guard, with Gareth subsequently taking the knight's pitch black armor, black weapons, and all black banner to later meet and fight against the blue, green, and red knights of the land. And from just looking at these two stories, you can see that the use of the Black Knight was meant to convey the idea that, during that time, wearing such armor and displaying no heraldry signified that they stood alone and were not a vassal under any lord or lady, as well being used at times to conceal a knight's identity so they could fight without being impeded by feudal laws, like in the case of Lancelot in his Grail cycle and Tristram in his tale of entering into a tournament he was otherwise not meant to. In this, Unknown is strikingly similar to the Black Knight, as again, his black cloak bears no insignia or mark, confusing us as to whether he is in fact a Heartless or something else entirely. Furthermore, and like the tale of Gawain, Unknown strives to test our strength to see if we are worthy and chivalrous. Though, as we know now, Unknown is in reality Xemnas, the leader of Organization 13 and the nobody to Ansem the Wise's apprentice. A fact which brings up the question of whether the Black Knight, or knights, were in fact actual figures in the annals of history, giving credence to the legends themselves, or were really just figures of imagination. But potentially one of the strongest influences we might have in this creation of the Black Knight is with the Black Prince himself, Edward of Woodstock. Born to King Edward III, Edward of Woodstock, during his service in the 100 Years' War, was seen as one of the greatest commanders and most noble knights in England, where at just 16 years old, had victoriously commanded an army of his own to sack the commune of Crécy in northern France, which would subsequently grant the young knight a seat within the Order of the Garter to honor his chivalry and loyalty to the Crown of England. Surprisingly, Edward wouldn't actually gain this title or nickname of Black Prince for another almost 200 years, where during the 16th century, figures like the poet John Leland and writer Roger Ascham and many others would associate the nickname of the Black Prince with Edward. Though, as to why he would have gotten this moniker in the first place is still widely debated for a variety of reasons, with some claiming that the armor he wore into battle was that of burnished steel or darkened steel, which gave the appearance of it being black, while others state that the title of Black Prince was actually earned due to his heinous and aggressive actions against the French. Whichever the case may have been, it's his coat of arms, consisting of 3 feathers in white against a black background, that well establishes his connection to that color. With that said, one group that may have actually helped influence the strength of the Black Knight were the Schwartz Riders of the 16th century. As a cavalry unit that originated as a legion of the German military, they were among the most efficient and deadly cavalrymen in Western Europe, who later became a mercenary group during the Scamaldic War of the mid-16th century, where they were used to break the pikemen's lines. Additionally, to ensure riders' efficiency in battle, the traditional plate armor worn by many soldiers at that time would instead be fabricated with more openings to allow for better maneuverability, and would be as well coated in an acidic solution that not only made the metal easier to work with, but also darkened the armor, giving each piece its black or darkened appearance. With this, their strength in battle and their lack of allegiance to any specific side, these legendary knights would undoubtedly contribute to the myth of the Black Knight, and transform the Black Knight into one of the most famous tropes, with the name of the Black Knight even being attributed to figures like Batman as the Dark Knight, the Black Knight of Marvel, and most famously, and most importantly, the Black Knight of Monty Python.
Yes, I have. Look! Just a flesh wound.
Okay, well, I couldn't really help myself with that one. With all that said, it's still honestly up in the air whether Unknown's depiction in this instance and appearance here in the castle of Hollow Bastion is directly influenced by the legend and history of the Black Knight. Nevertheless, it's unmistakable to see the illusions that are presented here, as this fight is seemingly a fight to the death, as each side is determined to fight as if their lives depended on it. Adding to this is that not only is this Black Knight completely unknown to us, but his words and intentions leave us utterly in the dark. That even when we defeat this Black Knight, we're still left with more questions than answers.
What are you talking about? Wait, what are you?
And so, as Unknown fades away, seemingly into nothingness, he tells us that he is but a mere shell. A fact that is furthered by our acquiring of the 13th Ansem report, which explains the separation of the heart and the body, which, when done so, subsequently creates a nobody that stands opposite to their heartless. A report that further adds another piece to the puzzle that connects this unknown figure to the Black Knight, as they were meant to be nobody in particular, neither lord nor vassal. A figure that was not meant to exist. From Phantom requiring us to utilize our magic and timing to Unknown forcing us to not button mash, each superboss that has stood against us here in Kingdom Hearts has had their own unique story to tell, not only in their mechanics and designs, but in their varying mythology as well. Functioning primarily as the barriers for full completion and our victories acting as testaments of our skill, these superbosses are, at least in my opinion, some of the best the series has to offer, and would set a precedent for later entries to expand upon in exquisite detail. But with this final victory against these pillars of noteworthy superbosses and our completion of nearly everything that each of the worlds has to offer, we now stand at the precipice of our journey's end. An end that, if we stare too long into, may just stare back at us all the same. To be honest, the closer we get to the end of the journey, the more emotional it makes me. At this point, we've been on this journey for nearly 2 years, and now we're nearing its climactic ending. Next time, we'll be jumping into the end of the world and finishing out our time with Kingdom Hearts. So, if you've enjoyed this journey and want to see it through to the end, or at least be a part of the next journey, then consider joining the community by subscribing to the channel or even by joining our Patreon. We've got some incredible people like Steve, Vagar Arnson, Erickson James, and Sarah Smith, who all go above and beyond to help out the channel, and I'd love to see your name along with theirs. So, thank you. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.